Alright, so another really bad autocross day on the E36. I've had multiple times where the fan moves forward into the radiator and just blows everything up. I've done the front subframe, I've done new motor mounts, a new fan clutch, a new water pump, and the radiator is not moving and it's in the right place, and it's all stock parts. So if anybody has any idea what's wrong with this thing, just let me know. Anyways, today we're going to be working on the E46. So we're going to be washing it and then bringing it into the garage and figuring out what's wrong with all the bushings and ball joints, because the steering is super loosey-goosey. And that's about it. So let's get started. I got it all cleaned up, and I guess this is a good chance to look at how bad this paint is. There's clear on these surfaces, but these horizontal surfaces, like this hood, is, yeah, it's beyond repair. This roof, definitely beyond repair. Even these pillars are just gone. I did go ahead and clay it, so the paint feels pretty smooth, but I didn't do like the best job, so like this body line is still rougher feeling than this right here. But it's whatever. This is not a show car, and it's not trying to be a show car. Anyways, the first thing I actually had to do on this car is repair the trunk wiring harness. So I popped this grommet out, made a slit down the middle, and then I used these solder seals. If you could, yeah, you can see that. So I used solder seals to reattach the wire. I took an extra, like maybe 1.5 inch strip of wire from my little collection of BMW wiring harnesses, and I spliced it in there just so there's a little bit extra run, so all these brown wires are the ones that broke. They have a little bit of extra play, and I just pulled them up, and that's why this grommet's out. Pulled them up, and I'm stuffing them into the trunk. Anyways, I used these. Ooh, I can't even read that. Let me turn this off. I used these solder seals, and then a heat gun and a stripper, and then pretty easy. But now, if we go around here, that works. Next up, I've been looking on Google and stuff. This Allen key right here, or Allen head bolt, controls how tight this door handle is. So I'm going to try and adjust that to get the driver's door to open better and easier, so I don't pull the handle off. And that's some of the easy fixes. Here's another look at that interior. Again, it's not wrecked anymore. This bolster definitely looks a lot better than when I first got it, because it was kind of droopy, and I've steamed the foam and it's definitely revived it a little bit. Probably gonna go to Walmart to actually get a patch right here so this stops ripping, and that interior will be good. So I've dug a little bit deeper into the 2 grand ZHP. There's nothing janky going on in the engine bay from what I can tell. The air filter looks reasonable, microfilter looks reasonable. There's a slight weepage from the oil filter housing gasket, but that's expected out of every E46, I believe. This expansion tank, I can't find a date code, but it is a BMW expansion tank with some type of aftermarket radiator cap. I haven't gotten far enough to look at the radiator, but also from the top-down view, I'm not seeing a date code anywhere. So, yeah, there's no date code on this radiator itself, but it could be an original BMW one. The valve cover has been done before, and it's not leaking, and the spark plug holes in all of them are perfectly fine. I pulled one plug out. It's the good type of NGK that I would use. It has 5 original coils, and number 1 is a aftermarket coil, I believe. I actually haven't looked at it. It says, I think it's a Duralast coil, but I mean, it's not misfiring or anything, so I don't have an issue there. I don't really have a reason to pull the valve cover to check if it has ZHP cams, so I guess the mystery engine still lives on. Could be a real ZHP, might not, and it might just be a 330, who knows. VIN is still a ZHP, by the way. Anyways, I guess the engine goes back together. I might detail it, might not, and we're going to continue on with the suspension. And the last thing I'm going to do, what I'm going to show you tonight, is I have a spare 712 yellow tag ZHP rack. This came out of a ZHP with 138,000 miles, and I'm only doing that because the internal seals on my current rack on that car is leaking. So when I snipped the boot clamps and I pulled the boot off, a couple ounces dripped out of that rack. So this one is nice and dry, so we're gonna swap it over because that's at least the first thing that I have to do. And then I'm also gonna have to assess which other ball joints are bad, and I'm hoping I can get some life out of this inner tie rod and outer tie rod versus the 223,000 mile tie rods on this thing, which is what I'm assuming it has. I do think there is some life left in this because, while not the best test, these ball joints are tight. Now let's dig into the suspension. I'm finding one very interesting thing. Previous owner said that he did the steering coupler, and I'm looking underneath the car. It's a BMW branded steering coupler, but if you look at it here with how the bolts go through, the eTorx bolt is flush with the coupler itself. Now when I go look at the car, oh yeah, so both bolts have that big gap from where the flange of the bolt is and the coupler. I don't know if the new BMW one is different. We'll see it when it comes out, but I have a really strong feeling that this isn't installed right, and that's why the steering feels loosey-goosey and pretty much awful. I also shook everything, and these two ball joints are fine. These arms are gonna get replaced anyway when the steering rack gets replaced, and this bushing is the only thing that looks like there's a lot of movement. Basically it goes all the way to like the metal sleeve left and right, and it's dated 2008, so I'm thinking this bushing is gonna get replaced with a poly bushing when I get around to it and start ordering parts. Otherwise, this thing is good. We're gonna drain the power steering fluid and just drop the rack and put on the new ones. I got the steering rack out with a lot of fussing and a big drill bit. And that's because the previous owner had all good intentions with the car, trying to replace the steering coupler to get the steering feel back, but they made a big oopsie and put the bolts on backwards. So if you look at the old one from the junkyard car, you have a threaded side, and then the opposite side is just unthreaded. So you want the bolt head to go from this side through where the thread on the bolt clamps down and squeezes everything. If you look on this coupler, you have this little lip, which corresponds to this little lip over here, but the flange head is on the same side. So when the bolt goes through, it is not threading into anything, so there's no clamping force, and that's where my super loose steering came from. It's doing the same thing on the other side of the coupler, so the previous owner just made a big oopsie. Anyways, because he made this oopsie and he just kept on cranking it down, he stripped out the threaded side, so these bolts don't actually back out, and therefore I had to drill everything out. So that was kind of a pain, but luckily access is pretty easy. So here we are, racks out, and this stuff's gonna go back on. I'm just gonna take all these hoses off, use whatever's on the car, figure out the crust washer situation, and we will be good to go. Like, what I thought was bad here probably isn't too bad, and I know for a fact this guy is new, this tie rod end, not the inner tie rod. But again, 140,000 mile car, we're just gonna run with that entire rack setup, and let's continue on. And we're back with the E46. It's a couple days later because I took it out to a dealership to get a passenger airbag recall done. I ended up polishing the hood a little bit and throwing a coat of sealant on, On a cloudy day, it's completely passable, but on a bright sunny day, it is not. The biggest update would be the steering wheel. So let's get the steering wheel unlocked on this car. So again, it's nice and tight again, right in the center. I'm using the Junkyard 140K rack and couplers and tie rods, but it feels nice and tight again. So that's good. The other things I guess I could show you would be the elephant trunk back here, because this latch and everything works again, and I'm using the Honda capsaicin tape only because I ran out of electrical tape. So if this starts unraveling, I'll redo it with some 3M stuff, but otherwise this trunk and everything is good to go. This was a really short weekend wrench sesh. I basically kind of assessed what the car needed and got it driving respectably again, and it does drive around the block pretty well now, especially with the steering that's not sketchy at 50 miles an hour. I guess now I just go back and start buying parts from FCP and ECS. We're going to get the rear diff bushing clunk fixed, and I'm going to start addressing some oil leaks up front in the next episode, but until then you're not going to be seeing anything on the 2K ZHP. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more videos.